Now let's look at the lesson from Japan. In Japan, they had 20 years of zero interest rate policy, and they have also gone into negative interest rate policy as well. And this has been rather strange for many observers when they think about monetary policy 101. Because according to the textbook, lower interest rates should lead to increase in bank loans. But the data from Japan has been rather strange because if you look at this CD rate, right, certificate of deposit or time deposit or fixed rate deposit, the 3-month rate is very close to the Bank of Japan's policy rate. We see this blue line here declining in the 90s, right? And this white histogram here is borrowing from financial institution, and the red histogram refers to funds raised in the securities market. What this chart is saying is that throughout this period, when interest rate was declining in Japan, the blue line declining, borrowings actually came down. Borrowing from banks came down, and borrowings in the bond market came down. The strangest part was when interest rate fell down to zero, when the textbook would have expected a lot of borrowing. After all, who would not borrow money at zero interest rate? The strange thing in Japan, according to this Bank of Japan data, is that we actually have seen negative borrowing. That means that companies were rushing to pay down debt, even though interest rate has fallen from whatever level down to 0%. At 0%, companies were rushing to pay down their debt. Very strange, right? But let me illustrate by looking at this simple diagram here. Imagine a company with a balance sheet, right? And they started off with uh, $20, right, equity, and they borrow $80 to invest $100 in asset, and happy for them, this asset went up to $110. They still owe 80. What happened to the equity? 30, right? So from 20 to 30, that is a 50% ROE, return on earning. Very good, right? So as this chart illustrates, right, something that I bought at 100 went up to 110, right? They've done very well. But sadly, the land prices and the stock market both fell sharply. And in our simple example here, whatever that was worth 110 has now fallen down to 20. But these companies still owe 80. So what is their equity now? Negative. They are bankrupt. Okay? So when a company is bankrupt, right, would they want to borrow money? Can they borrow money? Well, the answer is no, of course, right? So this has changed the landscape, the way corporation in Japan have been running their business, from maximizing profit to minimizing debt. So in the case of Japan, they have corporations like Sony and Toshiba, Toyota that are generating cash flow every month. And what do they do with this cash flow? They use this to pay down the debt, because whatever asset they have are now marked down significantly. So they have no choice but to pay off the debt. Interest rate has fallen from 3% to 1%. They will still pay down debt. Interest rate fell from 1% to 0%. They will still pay down the debt because they want to minimize their debt. So this leads us to something very different. As if the world has changed. We used to live in a textbook world where we have high powered money. This is central bank pumping reserve into the system, and that would coincide with increasing money supply and increasing credit extended to the private sector. However, in the balance sheet recession, where companies are having too much debt, then monetary policy would no longer be effective. As you can see from this red line here, high powered money rises sharply. Central bank pumping a lot of money into the system, but what happened to credit extended to the private sector? They are not rising. So therefore, whatever increase in high powered money did not lead to sharp increases in money supply. So we need to see, right, that the world can move drastically away from the textbook economics. And we have to understand that when we have a balance sheet recession, monetary policy is no longer effective. This concludes this segment.